I'm Aryeh Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr show, where it's all about the W. I'm very excited for this episode as we continue our series of going in depth on each team in the WNBA. This episode, we welcome Chicago Sky beat reporter Annie Costabile of the Chicago Sun-Times to the show. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our staff's amazing written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. While you're over there, people are still playing overseas. Yes, they are. Our overseas tracker is live now. You can see where your favorite WNBA players are playing overseas all in one place. And remember, downloading the episode makes our stats look better and allows us to continue doing this important work. Annie Costabile, welcome to the show. So excited, so happy to have you. I'm a big fan of your work. I've been reading you for a good minute now. How you doing? What's going on? Where are you these days?
Man, it's been a slow work week. Not a ton of news going on right now. Also, my apologies for coming in early on that music. I hope you could turn me down
You're
in the
good.
beginning. But yeah, really happy to be here. We obviously have a lot to talk about. I'm here joining you from Chicago, from my apartment in Noble Square. Shout out to Noble Square. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here as well.
So, before we get into this and go in depth on the Chicago Sky,
Yes.
remind the folks, tell them where they can see your work and see your ramblings and thoughts.
Well, support local journalism and obviously support the W, support reporters covering the W. And you could do that by subscribing to the Sun-Times. And if you're only interested in, following my coverage of the Chicago Sky, you can follow me on Twitter at Annie Costabile, on Instagram at Annie Costabile. I share all my stories and all my content there as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm always going to encourage people to support local journalism and support the Chicago Sun-Times by subscribing. And you can do that at thechicago.suntimes.com.
Boom. Love it. That sounded like a recording ad, but I love it. No, like in the best way. All right, let's talk some Chicago Sky.
Let's get into it.
How you feeling about this team? Give us some updates. What's going on during training camp, and what are your key takeaways? I know you haven't been able to be there live in person. Nobody has,
Right.
So obviously we're very reliant on the word of others. But talk to me. I know you're in there as often as possible. Talk to me about what your takeaways are.
Yeah, obviously I've been at every media availability. They've all been over Zoom. Cannot wait for the day when we can be back in person with people, players, coaches. But I think, there's been a ton of takeaways, so it's hard to nail down one. I guess if I had to nail down, the major takeaway from training camp, it's just that they've still been without so many players. Courtney Vandersloot, Allie Quigley have not been with the team. Stu, I think today it was her first day practicing. I believe she's still going to be available she is going to be available to the media today. It's May 7th. And also Shyla Heel has not joined the team due to some issues with her travel visa. It just was delayed in getting approved. She has been approved, so she's expected to be with the team next week. So I think the biggest takeaway is that as much as they've been able to do, they still have not been able to do a lot in terms of, solidifying their backcourt. We know, Courtney is at the helm. She's leading this team. Like, there's not questions as to, what the backcourt's going to look like, but it's still hard to implement certain things when you don't have your entire roster together. Ruthie is also still not with the team. So again, there's just some moving parts right now.
But I would say that to a degree, there is a positive of this because going into the offseason, or not, I shouldn't say the offseason because that would be glossing over Candace Parker joining the team. But when you look at the post Candace Parker era of Chicago Sky, I think the real question has been that backup guard position behind Quiggs. Vandersloot. I always write them as Vanderquigs because I keep them together so often. Um,
Hey,
but
that's a great nickname. I think they like that nickname. I haven't had a chance to ask, but it's a great nickname.
find out.
I will.
That's what the important things that we need to know. Breaking news. But I find it, that this team, the real question mark was the backup point guard position. They have depth up in the bigs. They have depth at the wing. They have depth really everywhere except that guard position.
Right.
Um, and it's always been a question, but definitely a positive if I'm James head coach slash GM James Wade, that I can sit here and go, I know what I'm getting from Vander Quiggs. Now, granted, the negativity of not having Heel there is a big issue, right? Let's not gloss over that. That's their top pick. That's a player who is a long term solution. I don't not
Right.
even solution, a long term answer to a question that they've had for a while. And honestly, here's the thing: to back up Vanderquigs or just Vandersloot isn't the hardest of jobs, right? It's essentially keep the boat afloat when because she needs to rest. We need somebody who can do some positivity while one of our best players, arguably the best point guard in the league, arguably an MVP caliber player, is doing that work, but she needs to take that rest. What has your takeaway been as far as the fight for that coveted backup of Vandersloot position?
I think that obviously Shyla Heal not being with the team right now, like you said, is it puts a question mark there just in the simple fact that they drafted this player to be, like you said, a long-term answer to that backup position, and also learn from Courtney to possibly one day be the number one. And obviously a lot goes into that, a lot can change between now and whenever Courtney takes her, plays her final game in the WNBA. I'm not at all, trying to get into her retirement. Courtney has many games ahead of her, but Shyla not being here right now is a challenge. But there's been incredible point guard battles, and I think one specific to pay attention to is Lexi Brown. She was brought in, and she's a veteran presence in this league, you could say. She has a couple years under her belt, and so as much as the Sky drafted Shyla as a quote unquote, what did Wade say, a solidified player, he didn't draft her to not sign her. um there's other options at that backup point guard position as well.
And the Lexi Brown, when she was originally signed, I remarked, there was a lot of hoopla about it, and my remark kind of got me some blowback of saying, like, that's great and all, but the way that this roster is constructed right now, I can't expect her to make the roster. Now, as news broke yesterday, shout out to the many reporters who had coverage of this, but I got to give shout out to my girl Rachel Galligan for breaking it. The team places Gabby Williams on the suspended for the year list. I don't know, like, we can talk about it. It's not like something that we need to avoid or anything like that. I think it's pretty clear what happened. I mean, we're not going to get into speculations of, I know all over social media, there's speculations. Did the team tell her? Did the team not tell her? Did she approve it? Did she not? That's surrounding stuff, but that's not the crux of it. The crux of it is, one, it was quite obvious after news broke that she was possibly going to be traded on draft night. Once that news broke, it was quite obvious that the situation was Chicago under one of the parties wanted out. That, like, just flat out one of the parties, and maybe two of the parties. It doesn't matter. The writing was on the wall, and it got to a point where if a trade wasn't going to happen, Chicago had to make a tough decision of, she's not going to be here till, let's assume, August, very end of the season, which means that this team would be running a 10-person roster for the majority of the season. And when you have some, I don't want to call them older players, but more veteran players, that's not ideal, especially when the chips are in and you're going all in to win a championship this
Right.
year, next year. You know what I mean? So, like, it was a situation where the team had to go, okay, if we can't move her and get some return back, and I always side with the team in this regard, in the sense of, if you have this player under contract, I'm not just cutting them so they can go play for someone else.
Right.
I need to get some return, and that's just the business of it. let's talk about this roster and what the Gabby Williams suspension does. There's only cap space for two more players, and I say two players, and everyone's going to look at me and say your numbers are off. Blah blah. Let me run down who I have on the roster in my mind. Speak
Uh-huh.
up if you think I'm wrong. Speak up if you're like you add a question to it. And I think you'll kind of get a sense of where I'm at. Candace Parker's a fit. Allie Quigley's a fit. Courtney Vandersloot's a fit. Diamond Shields, Azrae Stevens, Clea Copper, Steph Dolson, Ruthie Hibbard. Now, I believe Astu is a lock also. I kept saying fit. I don't know. I meant lock. I believe Astu's a lock also, but obviously my whole plan goes out the window and it changes many things because Astu does have that salary that is on a base slightly higher than lower level training camp contracts. Similar level, in fact, same exact amount as Lexi Brown for that base salary. But so what we're in a situation now is I assume Heel's making it. I assume when you put that effort into drafting that player and how hyped the team is on her, and maybe that's a bad assumption, I assume she's making it. So that's 10 players that I just listed off there. Now, if we would have included Gabby at that 11, you're set, you're done, it's over. But now removing Gabby from the equation gives you the opportunity to possibly sign a Natasha Mack, someone who I've heard some
Right.
great stuff with,
Right.
or to sign Alexi Brown. And I think the heel aspect adds an element of, okay, maybe she doesn't come over, or she's now on her way over, as you said, or about to be on her way over, whatever it is. But in that situation, do you worry about this is a team that's going for the championship run? Do we possibly bring Lexi in, a player who can not only play the point, but can also play off ball as a shooter, a versatile player, which might signal the end of Natasha Mack's time in Chicago? What's your thoughts of the makeup of this and that very coveted 11th spot?
Obviously, again, want to begin by shouting out Rachel for breaking that news. I was able to confirm it with James, shortly after. And obviously, you're right. This was done to free up space for them to have a player that they can depend on the entire season, even though this is a very deep team filled with a lot of talented stars. It takes everybody to win a championship, and that's the ultimate goal. It's I don't know how many people actually truly understand how challenging it is to win a championship, and I'm including myself in that. Everything has to work. Everything
Mm-hmm.
has to go, it has to fall together essentially. And so when you are going into the season already with a player like Gabby, who's extremely talented, no one has ever said this has anything to do with Gabby not being an asset to the team. Um, but when you are already starting the season kind of behind the mark, I guess you can say, in that she was going to be largely unavailable due to her commitments with the French national team, that's problematic. So, that aside, now you're looking at this roster and some of the training camp players that, are fighting for a spot on this 11-player roster. And absolutely, I think Natasha Mack is a player that Wade has had nothing but positive things to say about. I will say that there has been discussion about, her having to get adjusted to the speed of things and learning as she goes. And when you think about those things, it kind of makes you wonder, okay, are they making those comments because she's not quite ready to make a WNBA roster? Are they making those comments just acknowledging that she's still growing? That kind of put a question mark in my head as to, is she truly capable of making that 11-player roster? But when you look at a player like Lexi, who, can play on the ball and off the ball, similar to Gabby, when this news broke, to me, Lexi jumped off the page as a player that's going to that could earn a spot on this roster. And then when you consider Shyla as well, Shyla is more of a true point guard, and she is someone who Wade has talked about playing very similar to Courtney. So, and he's also mentioned, she's again a solidified player. So when you're talking about that 11-player roster, I, in my mind, also consider Shyla as part of that 11-player roster. So when this news broke about Gabby, to me, the two players that, again, jumped off the page as potentially filling that 11th spot was first Lexi and then Natasha.
Oh yeah, and also like to keep in mind two things. One, you look at the roster we just laid out: Parker, Stevens, Dolson, Hibbard, and Nadur are all bigs. So the idea that you need some more, like you have, let's say you split the team up into bigs and not bigs. If you
Uh-huh.
have already five of your roster as a big, you kind of need to even that out. So I definitely get what you're saying. I also wanted to point out something interesting when you were talking about Natasha Mack and the comments about getting her up to speed and everything. I I think in the W we don't give enough credit to the mind game some of these coaches play. And I'm not saying that Coach Wade is doing this, but I think it might be something that coaches have done in the past and he might be doing right now, which is to play the mind game of saying Mac needs to make some adjustments, needs to get up to speed. It's a learning curve. Obviously, there's a learning curve for like 95% of all college players coming into the W,
Right.
but it could be a smart move to put those, plant that seed of doubt in other GMs' minds so that if they are in a position where they have to cut her because of, we need to sign Lexi, fits this team better, maybe that one comment plays enough of a game that other coaches don't pick her up and they're able to, secure her rights in some form, in some way, something like that, or can keep her in a back pocket for later on if something happens. I just want to throw that out there because it's definitely a possibility. Maybe I'm overreading into things and going stir crazy, being in a room watching a billion Zoom conferences. I don't know. But just wanted to throw that out there. Let's talk about strength and weakness. All right. We're going to
Mhm.
start with weakness. We start with the bad, then we move to the good. What do you think the weakness of this team is going to be? Um, like I could go first, but I'm on this one. I'm going to piggyback off you because it's easy to say the backup point guard position because you look at the rest of this roster and it's a pretty stacked roster. But is that just copping out and taking the easy answer? I don't know. What do you think the weakness is?
You know what? It's honestly really hard to say what the weakness is before you even see a team play. And especially as, listen, I'm a realist. Like, I'm never going to front like I'm out here with the same repertoire as James Wade or any of these other brilliant basketball minds. But obviously, when you're, critiquing a team, when you're analyzing a team, it's your job as a media member to do that. And so,
Mm-hmm.
as a member of the media covering this team, again, challenging to say what a weakness is before you've even seen the team play. But to me, a bigger weakness than backup point guard will be this team's defensive abilities.
Hmm.
Yes, they brought in the reigning defensive player of the year, and Candace is already hugely impacting this team and raising the bar on both ends of the court. But to me, that is going to be a bigger challenge throughout the entire season, is them making sure that they improve on that end of the court enough to contain some of these, other dominant teams in this league. I think that, if everything Wade has said about Shyla, it fits and stands, I think she's going to come in and be the backup point guard that this team needs, that this team has needed to get over the hump. The bigger question and the bigger, concern to me has been that this team has, consistently over the last couple of years struggled on defense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I guess the reason that I shy away, or that's maybe my second concern, is more so because, yeah, it's obviously been a concern, especially interior defense. Like, we're not going to sit here and talk that like Vander Quiggs is like the most staunch defensive players in league's history. But I've always viewed the interior defense as the bigger concern for this team. I mean, last year is kind of a wash when you have such athletic players like Diamond DeShields and Aryeh Stevens getting injured and missing out. But the influx of bringing those players back, along with Candace Parker, along with a Stu, for me, kind of like seeing those players come back. Now, granted, the naysayers will jump out at me and say, Stu was on a team that had some serious interior defensive issues. So what are you saying? How does that solve the issue? I just feel that they definitely marked off, okay, number one issue we need to solve is defense and slash superstar. They bring in a
Mhm.
superstar in Candace Parker coming off a Defensive Player of the Year award, and bringing back a Stu definitely solidifies the defense and says, okay, I feel comfortable saying they've answered that question. Will it work out? Like you said, we don't know until we see it play. But seeing the roster itself as basically only thing we can judge on, to me at least says, okay, I feel confident that they have at least addressed that question. And I similarly feel that with Shyla Heal, but I do think, with a player who has been unproven going up against WNBA size, WNBA speed players,
But
that's what I want to see.
sorry
You
to
know,
interrupt you, but she isn't unproven in that regard. She's played professionally in Australia since she was 14 years old, playing against WNBA players.
true?
Like, so Shyla has proven herself on the professional stage, and not just the professional stage, but against WNBA talent.
No, you're right.
So again, I think these two go hand in hand. I think, these are two quote unquote, what did you say, weaknesses, was it?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, we can say
yeah,
that.
these are two, I'll say question marks. These are two question marks heading into the season. And yes, on paper, it looks like they answered it, but only seeing them play will truly answer it.
First of all, appreciate you shutting me up and telling me I'm wrong. No, because here's the thing. Here's the thing. A lot of times I have guests on and they're afraid to say that. I want you, if you disagree with me, come say it to my face. Let's talk about it. No, and I agree. I think more so maybe I'm knocking her for her age, which obviously is not fair. There's still growth in her game, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. Can we see that top level? We've seen the highlight reels. Can we see that consistently top level play from her? I say yes, and I am excited about this signing, and I am hyped about it. The question is, like you're saying, can we see it? It's a question mark. Is the answer going to be yes, no, or maybe? And if it's maybe, it's just a prolonged question mark in my mind.
Well,
Maybe that's crazy.
I'll just ask you this then. If you have a player who's been playing professionally since she was 14 years old,
Mm-hmm.
who's coming into a team where Courtney Vandersloot is going to be her mentor, and we know Courtney is not the player who necessarily like coddles players, takes them under her wing, and hypes them up, blah blah blah. She leads by example. But regardless, coming into or a team where Courtney Vandersloot's going to be your mentor, you already have all this experience playing against grown women, some of the best women to play the game in Australia. I mean, I don't know if this is overly positive of me, but that sounds like a player that's gonna be ready to go.
It's the perfect fit. Don't get me wrong. It's the perfect fit because, as I said it before, and I don't want to downplay what her role is going to be by saying like all you need to do is keep the boat afloat. What I mean by that is like when she comes out, like the plus minus difference of when Sloot was on the court versus not was embarrassing.
Oh
And
yeah,
and that's what I mean by it is like there was such a big drop off. Now, obviously, there's going to be a drop off when you're talking about the accolades of Sloot, when you're talking